This is the Padawan Planet podcast, where we are learning in order to be better and teach better. I am Joel Amadon, and welcome to the show. What we do here on the Padawan Planet podcast is to pull out ideas from books, interviews, other podcasts, basically any content that is out there, and consider how to apply those ideas to being better and teaching better. Ultimately, the goal is to lead people to love others through learning and teaching. So far, the content for this show has been generated through books that I've read. But for the first time on the Padawan Planet podcast, we have an interview, or rather a conversation. So recently I was able to talk to Dr. Gary Williams, who is Vice President and Director of Athletics and Recreation at Wittenberg University. He is also an expert in leadership. That's what he got his PhD in. And more importantly, he is one of my best friends for the past 20 years. Recent events in our lives inspired this conversation you're about to hear on mentorship, which we'll explain toward the beginning of the conversation. Our plan is that this is one of many conversations around the theme of leadership that we intend to have in the coming months that will be featured on the podcast. What I like about this conversation is how Gary gets a chance to share the depth of his knowledge on this topic of mentorship while keeping it relatable by using the story of Star Wars to illustrate his points. So I really enjoyed that, talking about Yoda, and you're going to hear a Yoda impersonation that I'm not very proud of, but anyway, it's in there. It is just beautiful and illustrates Gary's abilities as a teacher and makes me reminisce about our time together teaching leadership school at Badger Boy State. Again, we'll talk about what Badger Boy State is in the conversation. Now, I want to honor your time, so let's dive into my conversation with Dr. Gary Williams. Oh, quickly, before I do, the audio at times gets a bit spotty, but it comes back right away, and I don't believe it interferes with the points Gary is trying to make. If it does, don't be afraid to ask a question via the Facebook page. Anyway, enjoy. All right, so I'm just really excited. This is my first interview here on the Padawan Planet podcast, and it wasn't from my asking, but more from a conversation with my good friend, Dr. Gary Williams at Wittenberg University. I'll let him share his title in just a second, but from my perspective, Gary has been a friend for over 20 years. Just has been someone that I've always been able to connect with, specifically around the topic of leadership, which we're going to get into in a second. But first, I'd just like to say hi to my friend Gary. Gary, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Joel. Thanks so much. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I actually hope that this conversation is the beginning of a few others, because I really admire, I've always admired the work that you do around your research topic. And more importantly, I feel like if we combine some forces and get our message out, I think we can make some really positive impacts in the people that we run across. And so I'm excited about today's conversation, and hopefully this will be the beginning of multiple conversations that we have over the course of the next couple months.
I was really excited that you had this idea and fits right into what we're trying to do here. The goal of the podcast is to lead people to love others through learning and teaching. And I think this is a great conversation for us to have around mentorship to start with, and see where other conversations we have. But just to think that leadership piece of leading people to love others is something that I would not have put into that statement without you and what you have done. So again, very excited. So let's let you kick this off here. Can you just share a little bit of your story for those that are listening and how we got to right now?
Yeah, sure. So I originally grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, South Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it was in my junior year of high school I got introduced to a program called Badger Boys State. The Boys State program runs in almost all states except for, I think, two of them, one of which is Hawaii, which I still think, Joel, would be a great thing for us to
could start that up.
And start out there.
Aloha State, yes.
Aloha State, boy. Well, the Boys State program is a really inspirational week in which we teach both the governmental process of leadership, but also this notion of the self-exploration that's necessary as a leader. And so I was influenced by it immediately and got hooked into it. And then began in 1993. Then, as I was graduating from high school and starting college, realized that you had an opportunity to be a counselor on staff, and now 28 years later,
Wow.
we have gone through many different iterations of different people at Boys State, and different things have happened in both of our lives. But we met almost 20 years ago, and what's crazy to think about is that this program brought us together in a way that we never thought possible. In fact, it was over cards, playing cards. If you remember playing
Yes.
euchre.
Oh, yeah.
And there were some battles that we had late at night, but it was through those experiences that then helped me shape the rest of my career. I went on to Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I was a football player, a fraternity member. I was involved in admissions work. I think I was a assistant hall director. I did so many different things, and while at the same time pursuing chemistry, which is really ironic because I am certain that at the time, if I really had a more in-depth conversation about what my skills and abilities really were, I don't know if I would have really chosen that. But it was the path that I chose, and it helped forge the rest of my life because it, in essence, gave me some great critical thinking skills, some research background, an ability to make sure that I was seeing truth in things. But there was always this tug, and Boys State and being an assistant hall director and being on a football team just kept tugging me. And so I ended up going into a profession of being an athletic coach and a hall director at a college, and ended up working in academic advising. And then the next thing you know, some 20 years later, I applied to be a college athletic director and arrive here in Ohio, moving my family here. And I've been, for the last year, a vice president and director of athletics at Wittenberg University here in Springfield, Ohio. And yet, all the while, parallel to this, will be serving my 28th year as a counselor at Badger Boys. And I think about all that encompasses what it means to be a mentor and a leader. And if it wasn't for the influence of great mentors, I don't think I would be where I am today, professionally or personally. And then in turn, the gift of mentorship is something that I've been able to provide many different people, some successfully and some, as we'll talk about, maybe not so successfully. And I think this topic is really important and really should resonate with anyone who is really trying to find their place in the world.
Nice. Well, I guess that leads perfectly into the first question that I really wanted to get at in this conversation is, I mean, again, like I said before, you had this idea to have these conversations about mentorship and leadership and leadership development. And what led you to want to do this, to have this talk, to have these conversations?
You and I experienced a couple losses over the last year of mentors in our lives through the Boys State program. Fred Burns, who was a director of Badger Boys State, Bob Kesmerick, who was a longstanding leader within the organization. These men served as role models, as mentors, as guides for both of us. And in the last year, we lost both of them to cancer. And I was really struck by at least this most recent passing of Bob, that, they say that life is short, right? And you really don't realize it until you really realize that at 45 years old now, I'm halfway to what I hope is the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But actually 15 years away from where Bob lost his life. And I wonder to myself, and consistently wonder, what is the deeper meaning behind what we do every day? And how will we carry on their legacy of being great mentors and guides unless we initiate that and make sure that we are perpetuating that? And so So I really felt like it was important to honor both of them in a way, to talk about the gift that mentorship provided us, but also to talk a little bit about, how important it is in people's lives and what are some things that they can do to either enhance the relationship or to make certain that they are getting the most out of what it means to be in a mentoring relationship.
Well, I guess given your passion for this, and we should also say that you also got your PhD in leadership, and so you have an eye for this, not only in experiencing it but also in studying it, and also doing it within your job. What did you see with both Bob and Fred, like the qualities of a mentorship? And this is kind of going into a little bit of the questions later, but because I think that with Bob and Fred, they both were very different people. And experienced how they worked with individuals very differently. So what were the things that maybe you saw that were commonalities or versus the differences in how they mentored people?
So I guess maybe the first thing, before I kind of get to the heart of that question, I think it's important for us to just take a pause and just ask ourselves, like, what is mentoring, or what is mentorship? And so having a mentor is really about having a trusted counselor or a guide. Actually, the roots of mentorship start in the Odyssey, believe it or not. There was a character named Mentor, who instructed Odysseus' son Telemachus to stand up against enemies and search for knowledge. And that is the roots of where this idea and concept of reaching to someone for guidance and support was necessary for the person to not only see what's possible, but to listen to the voice inside of them and have someone outwardly give that voice back to them and encourage them to do what's right. And so one of the things about being in all the definitions about mentorship or being a good mentor, one of the things that's really striking is that very often part of the very definition of being a mentor is someone who offers assistance with life experiences out of the goodness of their heart. So they're not looking for a transactional experience. It starts transactionally. Usually the mentee wants something out of the mentor, and so they're taking and pulling from the savings account, so to speak, of these life lessons. And the mentor, who has this bank of knowledge, in essence, is giving them advice and feedback and pieces of who they are to the mentee. But this transaction then becomes transformational over time. And so when I think about Bob and I think about Fred, they both, you're right, approached things very differently. And for me, in my life, they meant different things. And so one of the things I know we're going to talk about, but I'll probably get to it right now, which is if anyone has ever seen Star Wars, you'll see this amazing relationship of and concept. That's Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces, wrote this about the experience of a hero and this concept called the hero's journey. You see it in The Matrix, you see it in The Hunger Games, you see it in The Wizard of Oz, and you see it in Star Wars. This journey that Luke Skywalker goes on. If you think about this is episode, 4, 5, and 6. So
nice.
not quite
not
quite the early ones. But if you think about those episodes, in each episode, Luke has a different style of mentor that arrives. The very first mentor in the first story was Obi-Wan Kenobi, who provided this sense of guidance and this sense of awe. Like, it was like, oh, this is Obi-Wan. Like, you're Obi-Wan. And
like possibility, right? I can go from farmer to being a Jedi. Whoa. Like, wow.
Exactly. And so Obi-Wan was like up on this pedestal. And a lot of us have these people in our lives who we first get interacted with, and they are up on a pedestal. It's because we're literally small people. we're youths, we're in grade school and in middle school or in high school, and we see these coaches and these guys, and they seem larger than life because we don't actually ever see the real person inside of them. We actually just see this persona. And so just like for you and me, a lot of these men and women entered our lives and provided this sense of direction. Well, in the next episode, and very much so, Joel, Bob was this kind of person. He was kind of like he was literally a larger than life figure who we were able to see and connect with. The irony is that Fred came into our lives around the same time, but he provided what Yoda provided Luke in the second movie, which was this antagonistic mentor. It's almost like the one that's needling. And if you watch the episode, Yoda is constantly jabbing at Luke and trying to push him and try to get under his skin while he's trying to train him. In fact, he uses sarcasm, he uses jokes, he uses all kinds of things. But then he warns Luke, like, you're not ready. And Luke's like, I am ready. And he's like, no, you're not. But you can go do what you want to do, but you're not ready. And a lot of us have had these, what I call, not antagonistic leadership. It's more just, it's a leadership that provides us this dissonance within us. Leaders that are able to call our bluff on things. So the next set of mentors that arrived in our lives for you and me and many others is more of an antagonistic mentor because they grate on us. We think we're better than them. We think we're smarter than them. We think that we know better. And they're poking at us because what they're trying to prepare us for is Darth Vader.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They're trying to prepare us for that third person that arrives in our life, which is this real challenging figure.
Right.
And those first two mentors, the ones that are up on a pedestal that provide us wisdom and guidance, and then the antagonistic one, those two different types of people are just so critical in our lives. And we have to understand that they're using different styles, but they're both preparing us to face our greatest fears. And Joseph Campbell always talks about, in the hero's journey, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. And so many of these mentors, Joel, in our lives have prepared us for the life lessons and difficulties we face as a parent, as a husband, as a partner, as a coworker. And if I think about those two characters of Obi-Wan and Yoda, I know that for me, I have played those roles in different people's lives and have created different mentoring experiences to hopefully prepare them to face their greatest fear, which is this idea and notion of Darth Vader, which could be, the greatest fear could be, stepping out and really picking a life passion, finding the right partner to live with, deciding what their trajectory is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that got me to thinking about both those different types of mentors. And you think about let's go in the story of Star Wars, go back to there. Both of those mentors, so Obi-Wan was old Ben, right? And so Luke was like, old Ben, right? At first, right? And he was a Jedi. And then Yoda was the crazy creature walking around I'm looking for this Grand Master, and and he's going, all over the place, tossing stuff around. And he wasn't expecting it probably putting thoughts into Luke Skywalker's head, but I would say he wasn't expecting to get that kind of relationship and guidance and teaching from those people initially, and then it was revealed, and then it's and how do we responded, and then now I'm going to seek out this teaching. I am going to listen to this person. They do have possibilities for me that are beyond my own expectations for myself, right?
Yeah.
And having that especially that second kind that we're talking about with Fred and maybe the antagonistic or the grading one, it's in hindsight that you value that that type of mentor more and more. You're like, gosh, when he was just driving me crazy. Or I can think of a supervisor that I had that everyone kind of feared, but you know what? She made me a better teacher because she was asking me why and making me think about why I was doing certain things in the classroom and making sure it wasn't just something that was cute, but something that was thought out, right? And some, you're doing this just to be liked by your students. Like, no, there's a specific intention behind these moves, so that I'm doing it because I know she's going to ask me about it. Like, if I don't have these intentions to go and create better learning or better relationships or whatnot, it's gonna someone's going to call me on it later if I don't have those now. And she did it in a safe place, right? This place of either we're talking about Badger Boy State or we're talking about in a student-teaching relationship where the stakes are a little bit lower to prepare you for Darth Vader. So
yes, and the idea and notion of Darth Vader represents this power and authority in our lives, right? And so, it's almost the transactional external motive. And Obi-Wan and Yoda represent these humble characters that really reside behind the scenes, that aren't the coolest cats in town, right? They're not the cool guys because it's the crazy Ben and the crazy, even Obi-Wan and or Luke, talked to his uncle and he's like, oh, that crazy man, he lives out there, so many great leaders are considered that. Like, they're not cool. The powerful ones, the ones who use power and authority that people are in awe of, can really be very unproductive leaders. And we've seen them throughout all of society, from the Adolf Hitlers to the Mussolinis to the Osama bin Ladens. I mean, all of those characters, they still are providing, ironically, leadership and mentoring, but they're choosing unproductive paths because to them, power and authority and accomplishing and getting worth, whether it's self-worth or actual financial worth, is way more important than the altruism of the Force, than the altruism of the good of like the Obi-Wans and the Yodas. And so, but it's the irony of the story is that in the end, remember, Darth Vader started as Anakin. He started good. And in the end, he became good because he finally saw the light in his ways. And so this is where, for me, I always have to take a pause and remember that every single one of those unproductive, sometimes negative leaders started once as a really innocent person, but got derailed at some point, whether it was by ego or being motivated by extrinsic things. They all started innocently, and then they lost their way. And this is why people like you and me cannot stop reaching out to other people, because the more Obi-Wans and Yodas that are out there, we have a chance to also influence all of the emperors and the Darth Vaders who are also trying to gather people around them to have them drink their Kool-Aid of you're smarter, you're better than everybody else, versus that more humble, altruistic, loving leader that does not care, that like Obi-Wan wears very humble clothes, and like Yoda just stays in a little hut, and and we aren't the cool ones. I mean, you and I are not the cool cats. Like, we're just not. We never have, never will be. Sorry, I hate to break the news to you. Like, gosh. But yet in the same token, like, we have provided so many people this idea and notion of what it really means to lead, to love, to care, and for good or for bad, both you and I have experienced Luke Skywalkers who grow and prosper, and we've also experienced Darth Vaders who took advantage of our teachings, took advantage of our relationships, and then spun it into a negative direction. And yet in the end, you and I have to keep trying to figure out, like, how much do we keep extending ourselves to? Yeah. Because there is a growth point for us where, we needed mentors, and now we become the mentors. And how many it's hard because, we're remembering back to the definition, it's out of the goodness of our hearts we're doing this. But when your hearts are broken, when your hearts are frustrated, when your hearts are let down, and you invest so personally into the lives of other people, it can drain on a mentor. And sometimes, and I know for me recently, I've had to really pull back because I've had a couple strained mentoring relationships that didn't go in the directions that were healthy probably for them and I know for me, because I took it too personally or blurred those lines between being a mentor and a guide and actually being a friend, which are two separate things and need to be separated in this equation.
All right. So then so with any experience, right, when you reflect on an experience, you learn from it, right? And so given those experiences that you're talking about, so what was learned, right? So even what have you learned on how to make yourself a better mentor, right? Or how maybe do you choose or select, or what do you look for in a mentee? So either one of those. So what are the qualities of a good mentor that maybe maintain that healthy relationship, or thinking about what do you look for in a future mentee?
So I think what good mentors do is they challenge, they encourage, they provide perspective. They also do it in a way where it doesn't blur the lines between a personal connection and being a friend versus being a resource, kind of like a book on a shelf. Mm-hmm. Like there has to be a level of separation between the personal side of this. I think a really healthy mentor can be friendly, but it's really hard to be a friend because at some level, friendship gets blurred by emotions, which then get blurred by you being actually able to have a tough conversation. And what I found in the last 3 years, part of what I experienced in some failed mentoring relationships was a real blurred line, or a line that got crossed, that mixed work and mentorship, right? Where I'm a boss and a mentor, because that's hard to do, and it's really difficult.
Well, there's a power relationship.
It's a power relationship, right? Or the other side is, the false expectations that, when the mentee comes to you and is like all in on it, but then all of a sudden it gets hard because I'm an antagonistic mentor. Like I poke the bear, like I poke at you, I grind on you, I say the things you don't want to hear. At first, there's a honeymoon period where that's not happening. But when the mentor gets to the tough work with the mentee, if the mentee takes everything personally, then it's not going to work. It's going to blow up that relationship. And if a mentee is looking for a mentor to provide them political or professional positioning, or they tell the mentee what they want to hear, or probably even more importantly, they don't really follow up with the mentee. Mm-hmm. Like that the burden falls on the mentor to constantly reach out to the mentee, and there isn't a really good structure there. And remember, if a mentor is doing this out of the kindness of their heart, they're not looking for something tangible in return. But if they don't get any positive reinforcement from the mentee at any point in this, then that relationship is going to become strained. Because, quite frankly, anyone that does something out of the goodness of their heart still wants to be thanked and loved and told how important they are. And so I think that a lot of this comes down to expectations, right? On the forefront. What am I expecting out of this person? And, trust is huge. And when trust is lost in this relationship, it destroys the ability for the two to happen. And so I think that, for a lot of things, Joel, that the mentors and mentees can do for each other, it really, in the end, I think one of the most important things is it falls on the mentee squarely on the pupil, the student, the Padawan. It falls squarely on them to embrace the counsel of the mentor. If not, then the mentee should find a different source. because the mentor should not have to change for the mentee. And yet it's critical that there be dissonance, because otherwise there's no growth, right? There's no growth without death. There's no growth without change or breaking. Just like muscles that we talk about in athletics, you can't get stronger unless you break it down.
Oh yeah, we talk about productive struggle in the classroom. You got to have some sort of struggle, and it's towards some sort of end. Sorry, cut it off.
No, you're fine. This was supposed to be a conversation, not just me talking at you.
Well,
we get passionate about these things, right? And,
well, I hear you talking, I can. What's great is I can see your face, and I can see this is the kind of stuff that I soaked up at Boys State when you had leadership school, and you really got going on a topic, and you can see the passion behind it, and knowing that this conversation, is sparked by loss, right? Of two great individuals that Boys State had the honor of having them as counselors for so long, and thinking about what does it mean for us going forward with regards to this idea of mentorship, but that point of things falling on the mentee, and because what I'm seeing, and maybe you would agree with this, is that the time aspect, the time is the most valuable thing that we have right now, like the minutes that we have, and to be able to invest those strategically. And if a mentee is not really there to engage with whatever we're bringing, or or vice versa, if I'm not prepared to engage in a conversation with a mentor, like you were a mentor for me, I'd say you're still a mentor. Like if I'm not ready for that, well, then that's an investment that's just been thrown on the floor, right?
You're very right. Like thinking about, again, let's go back to Star Wars because it's a story people can relate to. Think about the time and effort that Obi-Wan put into Luke he never told Luke what to do. He never did. He introduced him to this really valuable lesson of teaching him about his life and really where he was going to go. And so here he goes. He's like, I can't leave this planet. I got to go back and deal with the harvest. And Obi-Wan knew in his heart, like, you can do what you want to do, but you're called here. But he never told him what to do. Luke found out for himself the hard way. And then he introduces him to this amazing power of the lightsaber, right? And he teaches him, and he talks to him, and he talks him through all this. And I think that time and effort was really valuable. It's also why when Obi-Wan got struck down by Darth Vader, Luke cried. Luke was sad because he saw that investment into him. The crazy part is in the next movie, Yoda is a pain in the ass, and he is impatient with Yoda, and he is impatient with himself, and he got a taste of what it's like to be the leader, and he felt like he had enough, like he's ready, right? Yeah. And I think so often in our society right now, we are constantly under the pressure of having to do more with less and be more than we really are capable of being, because everybody's pushing the envelope so hard. Nobody has patience for anything anymore. I think about some of the most difficult things I deal with is just this enormous lack of patience, of letting things play out. I didn't know what I wanted to. I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I just experienced things and let it play out. And I never lost my way because my mentor was never going to let me go far. Like, in the background, they were protecting me, and they knew that I was very likely going down a goofy road in chemistry, but they never said no. He was never like, no, you just kind of keep going. But in the end, I know that my life played out because I allowed it to be patient. Over these last couple of years in the position I'm in right now, and it's a higher administrative position within a university, I've lost that patience. Because part of it is the self-consumption of everyone else's lack of patience has caused me to be less patient. And I've had to really slow down my life and to really think about, am I ready for these challenges? And are you ready? And nobody wants to hear they're not ready. Like Luke did not want to hear from Yoda, you're not ready. You can't save your friends because you're not ready to save yourself. And what happened to Luke? He ends up getting his hand cut off. He ends up finding this secret out about his father, and he's devastated, and his friend gets put in carbonite because he was too impatient.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky for Luke, his mentors never left him. And even though in the third movie, when Yoda passes away, remember the very next image is Obi-Wan coming back and saying to Luke, like, hey, I'm still here, and here's kind of what's going on. And Luke's saying to him, why didn't you tell me these things? And Obi-Wan's like, because you weren't ready.
Right.
But now you're ready. And then once he became ready, he was able to reach out to his father, right, and to accomplish this goal. And the thing the mentees always forget about is embracing the mentors once they're gone. And remembering the last scene of the movie is Luke burying his father and then looking at the mentors in their spirits, in their images, and smiling at them as if to say, hey, you're right. Thanks for being with me on this journey. And them smiling at Luke saying, I'm proud of you. Mm-hmm. You survived this. And so those movies play out in our lives every day, every single day. And we have to remember that it is a relationship. It's not a transaction. But when it becomes a transaction, or when it loses its boundaries, it gets destroyed really easy.
Yes, that makes me think, like, who are the people in your life, in my own life too, that I want, I want them to see, like, hey, the investment that you made in me, like, it's playing out. Like, that's playing out. I think about Joe Dye at Janesville Parker High School, who was my, cooperating teacher when I was student teaching. He was there when I experienced 9/11 happened. And he showed me what it's like to act in crisis. And how do you invest in students, not for the perspective of them being a good football player or being a good student, just as people, and then they're going to perform, like as in people, and so I can push them in the classroom or on the field, and they can see it as from a position of caring, and not of, I want to get something out of you. Like, no, I want you to do as much as you can with the gifts you've been given, right? Yep. And so that, to be able to have Joe Dye, for example, look at where I'm at and seeing, like, hey, the investment that you made in me, the time that you invested in me, I want you to smile and hopefully see that, and you just hope that everyone would have that experience. That they would have that opportunity to be mentored by someone.
But see, the thing, Joel, that we have to battle through is the reality that so few people are patient enough to experience the growth of a real good relationship anymore. I mean, you think about how people date now. They use their phones and they go back and forth, and social media, and you're hitting and liking, and you're doing all these things. It's this instant gratification, right? And you've got to be instantly motivated. And I think about some staff members that I've interacted with, and when when you think to yourself, like, you've got every tool to make this possible. You are capable of doing this. And more importantly, you're in a position that you can excel in, and boom, they're gone. They're off to the next thing. They never ever land any roots and grow into who they are. I think often that we are having to, like, really ride the wave of where society is at and trying to get people back to the basics. Just even you and I talking face to face is lost so often. Yeah. And that's, like, one of the beauties of a really good mentoring relationship is just face-to-face time and just talking about life and about things. And, I had, Coach Dooms and Coach Church back in my high school that were some of the greatest mentors and guides for me. And they provided me this idea and notion of what it really meant to be a coach. who was a teacher, who loved and cared, and who wasn't looking for status or points or yards or stats. And then when these things happen, like Fred's funeral or Bob's passing, one of the things, Joel, that struck me is when they were having their moments, as they were ending their lives, I walked with Fred the whole way. I only walked with Bob a little way. Others walked with Bob because they were closer mentors and guides for him. But having walked with Fred almost every day, from the day of his diagnosis all the way to his passing, having walked every day with him really gives you some perspective on what really matters. Because it wasn't all the other stuff. It wasn't all the politics that we went through. It wasn't all the accomplishments and the awards. All those cliches about what's really going to matter in the end. It was the stories, the laughter, the lessons. And I just am thankful that when Fred passed, I was able to walk with him and express my love to him and care for him. And too often I see today that we've stopped doing that. We think liking something on Facebook or loving it on Instagram is the same as actually writing a note that says, you really matter, love you. You, sending a text or saying, hey, I want to set up a FaceTime with you for 20 minutes just to catch up, right? And so I work really hard in trying not to use Facebook to say happy birthday to anybody, because I think it's kind of a cop out. Like, it's easy to just say happy birthday because this came up and hit me in the face.
Right.
But when I see someone's birthday, I go to my phone and I send them a funny emoji, right? Like, because I want it to be special and different. How often, my challenge to people that are listening to this today is, when will it hit you? Is it going to be when you, like Luke Skywalker got his arm cut off, or when he finds out his secrets, or when he sees his friends in peril, or when we've experienced the loss of our mentor? When will you realize the gifts that you've been given, and how can you think about repaying that? Because every mentor did things for a reason, and while they did those things out of the kindness of their hearts, and quite frankly, most mentoring relationships, there's a time frame on them.
Right.
Very few people. You have a mentor for all of your life. We're lucky, for some of us, that we had one for over 20 years in Fred, or some of us, have been very fortunate to have ones that have been there throughout all of our lives. But there's a season for mentors. There's a time and a place for some of them, and it's okay when they fade away. But what's not okay is to never go back and remind that mentor about the good they did. Because remember, those mentors have great gifts, and the only way they will continue to perpetuate those gifts is if they feel like they're valued.
Right. Well, this gets me to something that's probably pretty important, because we might have some people that are listening that say, okay, I'm all in. I'm in on mentorship. I need a mentor. And I think about some of the mandatory mentors, mentors. I don't know, however you might want to put that I was, either assigned or was given. Like, here's your mentor in this area, and like they just didn't work out. I mean, because it's like they tried to, regulate this thing that there's a lot of ingredients that are going into finding a mentor. I mean, I think we ref football together and we just clicked having a conversation afterwards, and then that led to a lifelong of mentorship. Or I got lucky and assigned to a good cooperating teacher in Joe Dye, or think of other ones. How would you say someone should go about finding a mentor?
Don't try to find one.
Okay.
Because that's the thing, right, Joel? I mean, the more you search for something, the less you'll find it. It's like when I lose my wallet all the time, or here's another analogy. yes, just last weekend, our men's and women's golf teams were competing in the conference tournament, and this we were watching them this round from afar, and the women teed off, and the one woman from one school, she could not find her ball, and you get 3 minutes to find your ball, and if you don't find it in 3 minutes, you have to go back and you have to take a penalty stroke, etc. Well, there's all these people milling around trying to find this ball. They couldn't find it. And the person I was with and we were sitting at the green, and it was at the base of a hill in which we had to go up to go back to the clubhouse to see the rest of our teams come through. I cannot make this up. They searched. They ended up, she re-tees. They all play the hole. Another group plays the hole. And then we're like, okay, that was the last. We got to go up and start. We walk right by. Boom, there's your ball. Like clear as day. Like as if it was like a billboard. We literally just walked and bam, there it was. And we both kind of chuckled. We grabbed the ball and we both kind of chuckled because all we think to ourselves is how much of a microcosm that is for our lives. It's the more we seek for things, the harder it is to find. I would say to anyone that's out there looking for a mentor is they will emerge in your life. The hero's journey is a classic concept for all of us. I'm guaranteeing you someone is going to come across your life that you're going to see from afar, or that's going to antagonize you, right? Mm-hmm. You're either going to respect and emulate and want to emulate, or you're going to be antagonized by this person. They're going to pop in your life, and when you least expect it, they're going to be the perfect person for you to establish something that's deeper than just a friend, that is actually deeper than just a friendship. It's a special bond, because again, even with really good friends, we typically tend to surround ourselves with people that are like us, have the same ideals, and we all talk in a vacuum. But a real good mentor is really somebody who helps put the mirror in front of our face and help us see the person that we are for who we are, and then challenge us to think about where we want to go. And in so many ways, Joel, the more I've sought after these people, the harder it was. The more I tried to make it happen. Like, I know that I've made huge mistakes trying to impose my mentorship on people. Mm-hmm. And it ruined relationships I've had. And it's sad for me because I pushed it too hard. I saw something in them, and I tried to be something that they weren't ready for, and it failed. And I also have seen people push themselves on me and have been like, whoa, like, and then realize only after the fact that what they wanted out of me had nothing to do with mentoring. It had everything to do with political posturing or professional posturing. And so, these things emerge over time, and they happen, and I hate to be this cliche, but you'll know it when it happens, because the person will literally, you will start to see this person come in front of your face time and time again, and they'll either show itself in one of two forms, either the wise Obi-Wan or the antagonistic Yoda, and they will keep emerging. The other character to remember is Darth Vader. There are people in your life who will become like Darth Vader to you, who you also need to be aware of, because those are the people that you need to avoid, to not get influenced, to not get subdued by, to not get caught up in the glamour of their power and authority and get sucked into their indoctrination of how people are going to follow them. They're not a really good mentor. They're just providing you access and information and things through, unproductive means. The temptation of the power of the dark side is always going to be there, and yet it's in these humble people that emerge in our lives that we least expect, that we learn from. I mean, just yesterday I was at a Kiwanis board meeting. I'm a member of the Kiwanis board. It's serving children of the world. And I'm sitting next to this man, and I've seen him for years, right? and he had just lost his wife, and he and I sat on the door was locked. We couldn't get out. Like, we couldn't get out of the meeting. So we got out of the meeting, but we couldn't get out of the building. We just literally sat down, and all I did was listened. And he gave me some powerful life lessons about what it really means to be a partner with somebody, what it really means to lose, that how much you lose somebody, how you can't ever regret their loss, because eventually we are going to lose everything, right? Mm-hmm. To only gain the greatest gift. And I just sat and listened, and that was a mentoring relationship. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be a defined mentor, but I saw something in him and took a piece of him last night and brought that into my heart, right? And their mentors are around you every day. They're around us all the time. We just don't often see them because we're so busy being self-absorbed in our own world and just not listening to these calls that are happening.
Well, yeah, and think about like what you could have done in that situation, which is something, it's almost cliche now to say it, is like you could have been, I'm stuck in this situation. I'm going to pull out my screen, my phone. Yep. I'm going to put it in front of me. And then you just have missed out on, wow, you think about how much experience that he poured into you in that short amount of time. And that was
literally 5 minutes.
And that was a moment, right? And if we don't have those moments, or we don't see like, wow, I'm in this situation, I'm sitting next to this person, and there's a lull, and that's the time to have a question or a conversation that could lead to, wow, a learning that could ripple throughout your career, throughout your relationships. It's just one of those things that, how do we not, that makes me smile. Because that's like, I can think of all these different times that, you have provided me something at the point in my life that I was at where that I can now point to and see the ripples, or other people that I've had a chance to I do a lot of conferences. So, there's professionals where, wow, this point in time, the spirits aligned, and I've been put side by side with somebody who is right there. And so wasn't necessarily looking for it. I had some needs and that were being filled, and it's like being aware and like, okay, this is a moment and I need to take advantage of it. So not necessarily going to look for it, but being aware of it, right?
Yeah. And I think as mentors, or as people who classify themselves as mentors, like I'm a mentor, or I have mentored, but that doesn't mean that every relationship I'm in, I'm the mentor. Like, and recently, I know for me, I've faced some really, really unbelievable challenges in my life, and in my professional life, in my personal life, in transitioning to become a vice president of a university, and things that no textbook could ever teach you. And one of the things that I failed is I needed to not mentor anybody because I needed to take care of myself. And what I think so often we forget that the hat of being a mentor, it's intentional. We have to know when we're putting it on and off, mm-hmm. and not blur those lines with mentees or with other people in our lives, and then push onto them the things we need.
Yeah.
Like, they came to me because they needed guidance. I should not be going back to them and pulling out that guidance back out of them, right? And that's really the struggle that we go through. And mentors out there that are listening need to know that there's a time and a place when you are not a healthy mentor. And there's a reason. One of my favorite leadership analogies is the pre-plane instructions that none of us pay attention to. If the bag comes down and it's not gonna inflate, put yours on before you help anybody else. And I needed to put my own mask on, and unfortunately, especially in these last 5 years, with all of the different changes that have happened in my life, like, I failed in not just reaching back to my mentors and helping steady me. And only in the last maybe year or so have I then reached back out to you. I've reached back out to Dean Matthews, my mentor from Carthage, to people from my childhood, and have I've specifically gone back home more often just to be home and in a different environment. I went back to my fraternity's anniversary. I poured back into Boys State, because those places were the places where I was healthy, right? Where I remembered who I was. And right now, before I take on another mentee, I need to be ready to mentor.
Yeah. Well,
and I think that's critical.
Well, that reminds me of just the last book that I did for the podcast was Essentialism. And there's a chapter in there talking about this guy and who's just broke down. And the whole learning of that chapter was broken down into protect the asset. So you being the asset, right? And so that means taking care of yourself because, well, if the mentor breaks down or, is gone, can't be a mentor anymore, right? I mean, just as simple as that versus thinking about the quality of mentorship you can provide and knowing that if I don't take care of myself, if I don't, do the things that I need to be emotionally, physically healthy, that I'm not going to be worth anything to anyone, including myself.
And it's confusing for the mentee sometimes because they're still looking at you as this person on a pedestal, or you're the antagonist, one of the two, right? But either way, they're still looking at you for this guidance. But when you can't provide it, then it's no wonder why, for me, over these last 5 years, I've had some relationships just halt because I wasn't in a good place. They weren't really getting out of me they weren't getting the very best out of me, and so it's probably better that the relationships went into different directions. And this whole thing can't be taken personally. There's only so many people that you really are going to invite into your life for an extended period of time. You think that they're going to be we always think every relationship is going to be forever, but it's not. It's a reason, a season, a lifetime. It was something that I taught at years ago. Sometimes there's just a specific reason why I sat next to that human yesterday and he told me a story, and that may have been sometimes it's seasonal. You work in a setting, or it's a school year, or it's a certain time frame, and then there's a few of us. There's a few people who you will have for the rest of your life, but it's a choice. We have to make a choice on where these people get put. And for me, I think mentors, it's hard to have a mentor for a lifetime because they're often right there in front of us. And then when we leave them, it's really hard to stay connected, despite what everybody thinks about how easy it is to communicate these days. Real, honest communication, which is what mentoring really is about. That's hard to do when you're not face to face or you're not seeing the face of the person. And so I've come to grips with understanding better today than I have in 20 years of mentoring that, there's a season of this and then it disappears. But I'd be remiss if I told you that it still doesn't make me sad, because too often it's not until we pass away that we finally hear about the impacts that someone made, and it isn't even us that hear it. It's our partners, our family, and our children. And that's what got me to this place, what got us to do this podcast, which will get us to the next podcast, which is, what we need to do today is to remember those people and to take a moment after listening to this and reach out. For nothing more than just saying, thank you, you're awesome, keep on keeping on, and I hope, and whether you ever desire that again, to need them as a mentor or a guide, so be it. But, I mean, I cannot express enough how much it's too late to wait until the very last minute and then realize what you could have done 2 times a year: the person's birthday and Christmas. I mean, those are every holiday and their birthday, are the most critical days in people's lives. Those are, to me, the days I set aside to always let my mentors know how much I love them. Is I know when their birthday is, and then every holiday. I usually do Thanksgiving, I usually do Christmas, and those two are, and sometimes Easter, sometimes not, but Thanksgiving and Christmas and their birthday, 3 times a year, when I know that I can reach out to somebody, make it simple, right? Mm-hmm. And those typically always then lead to something over the summer that, and whatever. And they get spaced out well enough, and it's not hard to remember those days in someone's life that you think is really important. And I'm not talking about liking somebody on Facebook. I'm not talking about, just liking a message. That's not communicating, and that's not expressing real love. Real expression is through your cell phone, through a conversation, through, hey, I'm coming through this week. I just want to have lunch with you.
Right. Absolutely.
And or intentionally saying, I'm just going to drive a couple hours to just go see somebody. Mm-hmm. I mean, those things are invaluable, and and there's so much merit to those things that I hope that people out there that hear this will commit themselves to renewing their relationship with the people that were in their lives in a way they never thought they should have before.
Nice. Well, we are at an hour, so maybe we should probably leave some more brilliance for some other podcast. But that's what's great. Yeah. What's great. We're going to keep doing these. And which is I'm excited to think about the different conversations we can have. The one thing that I saw was, and I was just curious if you had any recommendations for books on mentoring. I know that I read one called The 1 Minute Mentoring by Ken Blanchard and Claire Diaz-Ortiz. That Ken Blanchard's written copious amounts of books on leadership, but this one was on mentorship specifically. I don't know if you knew of any.
Well, what's actually interesting is the Harvard Business Review is one of my favorite places for leadership articles, and there's a lot on there about mentoring and guiding and some do's and don'ts. And then, ironically, believe it or not, if you just Google search Star Wars mentoring, there's actually a lot out there about the hero's journey and Luke Skywalker and the relationship between those characters, because it's so realistic in terms of actually, real life experiences. And so I think it's simple, right?
Yeah.
But even just watching Star Wars again from a different perspective, and to really say to yourself, like, how did Luke, what happened to Anakin that pushed him in an unproductive direction, and what happened to Luke to keep him on a productive path? And they both were at identical places with identical types of situations. Mentor who's guiding and leading them and bringing them, and one just got seduced by temptation for power and authority. The other just made an altruistic belief in the greater good in people, and ultimately that's what us mentors are trying to do. Is they're trying to just show you the good and help you stay in that productive path.
That's awesome. I think that's a great suggestion to end on, but then it's also a great set of words to end on as well. Gary, thank you so much for joining me. We are going to do this again, and as someone who I look up to, but then also have gotten to be as good of friends with, this is just a pleasure. So I love you, and I look forward to the next conversation.
Yeah, I love you too, Joel, and I hope maybe after post this, and we set on our social media different avenues that people will respond back and let us know what they want to hear. Like I mean, there's a lot of great opportunities for different topics. We can sit and talk about them until we're blue in the face, but I hope maybe some of the people that are out there that actually listen to this podcast or are inspired by just our conversations might just give us some ideas, because those are the best ideas, not ours, but someone else's. And if we can fill a void somewhere, I hope we can.
Yep, this is that opportunity. You're sitting, it's like you're virtually sitting next to somebody. You say, hey, what do you think about this? And yep, I would echo that invitation. All right, Gary, thank you so much.
So thankful for Gary being willing to take the time and share some of his knowledge on the podcast. My hope is his desire to honor Bob and Fred by having this conversation inspires others, maybe you out there listening to this podcast, to engage in a mentoring relationship. On reflecting on what Gary had to say about mentoring, I've settled on a personal definition that mentoring is this personal pipeline through which wisdom is passed. Mentoring is a personal pipeline through which wisdom is passed. I thought that was maybe a nice way for me to think about what mentoring is. And so the day that I was editing the audio from this conversation with Gary, I heard an episode of the Jocko podcast when he was talking about losing some of his friends from the Navy SEALs. He made the point that all the memories of their personal relationship and the wisdom they passed on now only exists in him. He can't ask them about some point they made or story they shared because they're gone. That hit me when I realized that the wisdom that has been shared with me from Bob, Fred, even my dad who passed over 10 years ago, exists in me now. And now I have a choice to make. I can share it with others via maybe some sort of mentoring relationship, or I can let it die with me. That seems morbid, but it's true, right? If I engage in a relationship as a mentee, that means someone has invested their time and wisdom in me, right? They saw me as someone worthy of such an effort. Something tells me they also saw me as someone who would be willing to mentor others, who would pass on the wisdom that they gave to me, right? That they weren't just doing it so I would hoard all the information, hoard all this wisdom to myself. No. It is this idea of a pipeline that would flow through me. So if mentoring is this personal pipeline, if it is this pipeline through which wisdom is passed, then my choice is to keep the wisdom flowing, right? Through my teaching, through my parenting, through my coaching, through my advising, and hopefully through this podcast. So speaking of this podcast, we are now switching to an every 2 weeks format in an attempt to ramp up a once a week routine. The next podcast will feature the book, The Power of Moments, Why Certain Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact by Chip and Dan Heath. We will also feature some listener questions. This episode is way too long to address any questions. I know that a few of them trickled in, but I have one, especially from my friend Nick Wasserman in New York City, that I am super excited to answer on the next episode. So stay tuned and submit any questions you have via the Amidon Planet Facebook page, and maybe I'll address your question with Nick's. That is all for episode 4 of the Amidon Planet podcast. You can find show notes for the episode at amidonplanet.com/episode 4. Gary mentioned a number of links, and even a link to this Jocko podcast that I mentioned at the end here. So if you want to continue this conversation and or support the podcast, feel free to subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, Overcast, Stitcher, or Google Play. You can also follow the podcast in Spotify. You can also share the podcast. Maybe you heard something about mentoring that you know someone else needs to hear, so share the podcast. That gives us a little bit of attention. Review the podcast through your preferred podcast provider. You can also like the Amidon Planet Facebook page. There you will find a post with a question and a call to action regarding this episode of the podcast, specifically responding to Gary's question about what you all want to hear about in our next conversation. You can also subscribe to the Amidon Planet email list, which you can find as a button on the Amidon Planet Facebook page or at amidonplanet.com. You'll see a thing to subscribe to the email list right in the middle of the page. Finally, I've been asked how someone can financially support the Amidon Planet podcast, which thank you very much for that. I've started a Patreon account where folks can support me once a month to help cover some of the financial expenses of the podcast. You can find a button to my Patreon page at the bottom of amidonplanet.com where it says Be a Patron. Finally, if you just want to engage with me via social media, you can also find me via Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all on the handle at Amidon Planet. I'll be looking for questions and comments related to the episode, but I'll also be looking for general questions, suggestions for books to review, or other content to feature on the Amidon Planet podcast. In conclusion, thank you for taking the time to listen to episode 4 of the Amidon Planet podcast. We know there's lots of choices out there, so thank you very much. Special thanks to Gary Williams for the conversation, and special thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in the episode. Finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to be better, teach better, and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.